6. The huge bell in the tower of the council edifice began to ring. The bell governed the people's lives. It told them when to begin work and when to stop, when to gather for meetings, when to prepare for a hunt, celebrate an event, or arm for danger. 4 bells, the third was resonating now, meant that day's business could end. For Kira, it meant the time to report to the Council of Guardians. She hurried toward the central plaza through the crowds of people leaving their workplace. Matt was waiting on the steps as he had promised. Branch beside him was pawing excitedly at a large iridescent beetle, blocking its path again and again with the paw as the beetle tried unsuccessfully to waddle by. The dog looked up and wagged its crooked tail when Kira called a greeting. "What you got?" Matt asked, looking at the small bundle Kira carried on her back. "Not much," she laughed ruefully. "But I had stored a few things in the clearing so they missed the burning. My basket of threads and some scraps of cloth. And look at this, Matt." She reached into her pocket and held up a lumpy oblong. "I found my soap where I left it on a rock. Good thing, because I don't know how to make it, and I have no coins to buy any." Then she laughed, realizing that Matt, grimy and unkempt, felt no need of soap. She supposed Matt had a mother somewhere, and usually mothers scrub their tykes now and then, but she had never known Matt clean. "Here, I brung these." Matt indicated a pile of objects wrapped haphazardly in a dirty woven cloth on the step near him. "Some things I took before the burning, for you to have if they let you stay." "Thank you, Matt." Kira wondered what he had chosen to rescue. "But you will not be carrying it because of your horrid gimp," he said, referring to her crippled leg. "So I'll be your carrier once they tell you where you're to be. That way I'll know too." Kira liked the idea of Matt coming with her and knowing where she would live. It made everything seem less strange. "Wait here then," she told him. "I must go inside and they'll show me where I'll be living. Then I'll come back for you. I have to hurry, Matt, because the bells have finished and they told me to come at 4 bells. "Me and Branch can wait. I've got me a sucker I filched from a shop," Matt said, pulling a dirt-encrusted candy from his pocket. "And Branch, him always loves a mammoth buggy to poke, like now." The dog's ears shut up at the sound of his name, but his eyes never left the beetle on the step. Kira hurried inside the council edifice while the boy waited on the steps. Only Jamieson was in the large room waiting for her. She wondered if, having been appointed her defender at the trial, he was now to be her overseer. Oddly, she felt a little twinge of irritation. She was old enough to manage alone. Many girls her age were preparing for marriage. She had always known she would not marry. Her twisted leg made it an impossibility. She could never be a good wife, could never perform the many duties required. But certainly she could manage alone. Her mother had, and had taught her. But he nodded in welcome, and her brief irritation faded and was forgotten. "There you are," Jamieson said. He rose and folded the papers he'd been reading. "I'll show you to your quarters. It isn't far. It's in a wing of this building." Then he looked at her and at the small bundle she carried on her back. "Is that all you have?" he asked. She was glad that he had inquired because it gave her the opportunity to mention Matt. "Not quite," Kira told him, "but I can't carry much because of—" She gestured toward her leg. Jamieson nodded. "So I have a boy who helps me. His name is Matt. I hope you don't mind, but he's waiting on the steps. He has my other things. I was hoping that maybe you would let him continue as my helper. He's a good boy." Jamieson frowned slightly. Then he turned and called to one of the guards. "Get the boy from the steps," he said. "Ah," Kira interrupted. Both Jamieson and the guards turned. She felt awkward and spoke apologetically. She even felt herself bow slightly. "He has a dog," she said in a low voice. "He won't go any place without his dog." "It's quite small," she added in a whisper. Jamieson looked at her impatiently, as if he were suddenly aware what a burden she was going to be. Finally he sighed. "Bring the dog too," he told the guard. The three of them were led down a corridor. They were an odd trio, with Kira first, stumbling against her stick, dragging her leg with its broom sound, swish, swish. Then Matt, silent for a change, his eyes wide, taking in the grandeur of the surroundings. And finally, toenails tip-tapping against the tiled floor, the bent-tailed dog happily carrying a squirming beetle in his mouth. Matt put a bundle of Kira's belongings down on the floor just inside the doorway, but he wouldn't step inside the room. He took in everything solemnly with his wide-eyed, observant gaze and made the decision himself. Me and Branch will wait out here, he announced. What this be called? He asked, looking around the wide space where he stood. The corridor, Jamieson told him. Matt nodded. Me and Branch, we just be waiting here in this corridor then. Me and Branch, we don't go in the room because of the wee buggies. Kira looked over quickly, but the beetle had been consumed now. Anyway, the beetle had not been wee. Matt himself had described it as mammoth. Wee buggies? Jamieson was the one who inquired. His brow furrowed. Branch got fleas, Matt explained, looking at the floor. Jamieson shook his head. Kira saw his lips twitch in amusement. He led her into the room. She was astonished. The cot where she had lived all of her life with her mother had been a simple dirt-floored hut. Their beds had been straw-filled pallets on raised wooden shelves. Handmade utensils had held their belongings and food. They had always eaten together at a wooden table that Kira's father had made long before her birth. She mourned the table after the burning because of the memories it held for her mother. Katrina had described his strong hand smoothing the wood and rounding its corners so that the coming baby would not be endangered by sharp edges. All of it was ashes now, the smooth wood, the soft edges, the memory of his hands. This room had several tables, skillfully made, carved and delicate, and the bed was wood, on legs, covered with lightly woven bed coverings. Kira had never seen such a bed and supposed the raised legs were to make one safe from beasts or bugs. Yet surely there were none here, in the council edifice. Even Matt had sensed that, and consigned his dog's fleas to the corridor. There were windows with glass, and through them she could see the tops of trees. The room faced the forest behind the building. Jamieson opened the door inside the room, and Kira saw a smaller room, windowless, lined with wide drawers. The singer's robe is kept here, he told her. He opened one large drawer slightly, and she saw the folded robe with its bright threaded colors. He closed it again and gestured toward the other, smaller drawers. Supplies, he said. Whatever you need. He moved back into the bedroom and opened the door on the other side. She caught a glimpse of what at first seemed flat stones. It was a floor of pale green tile. There is water here, he explained, for washing and all your needs. Water? Inside the building? Jamieson went to the doorway and glanced out to where Matt and Branch waited. Matt was squatting on the floor and sucking on a stick of candy. If you want the boy to stay with you, you could wash him here. The dog too. There is a tub. Matt heard him and looked up toward Kira in dismay. No, me and Branch, we be going now, he said. Then, with an expression of concern, he asked, You don't be captive here, do you? No, she's not a captive, Jamieson reassured Matt. Why would you think that? Your supper will be brought, he told Kira. You're not alone here. The carver lives down the hall on the other side. He gestured with his hand to a closed door. The carver? Do you mean the boy named Thomas? Kira was startled. He lives here too? Yes. You are welcome to visit his room. You must both work during the daylight hours, but you may take your meals with the carver. Familiarize yourself with your quarters now and your tools. Get some rest. Tomorrow I'll go over your work assignment with you. I'll lead the boy and the dog out now. She stood in the open doorway and watched them retreat down the long corridor, the man leading the way, Matt walking gently just behind him, and the dog at Matt's heels. The boy looked back at her, waved slightly, and grinned with a questioning look. His face, smeared with the sticky candy, was alight with excitement. She knew that within minutes he would be telling his mates that he'd barely escaped being washed, his dog too, and all the fleas, a close call. Quietly, she closed the door and looked around. Kira found it hard to sleep, so much was strange. Only the moon was familiar. Tonight it was almost full, flooding her new living space with silvery light through the glass of her windows. On such a night back in her other life, in the windowless cot with her mother, she might have risen to enjoy the moonlight. On some moonlit night, she and her mother slept outside and stood together in the breeze, slapping at mosquitoes and watching the clouds slide past the bright globe in the night sky. Here, through a slightly opened window, night breeze and moonlight entered her room together. The moonlight slipped over the table in the corner and washed across the polished wooden floor. She saw her sandals paired beside the chair where she had sat to remove them. She saw her walking stick leaning in the corner, its shadow outlined on the wall. She saw the shapes of the objects on the table, the things that Matt had brought bundled to her. She wondered how he had chosen. Perhaps it had been rushed with the fire starting. Perhaps he had simply grabbed what he could with his impetuous, generous small hand. There was her threading frame. She thanked Matt in her mind. He had known what the frame meant to her. Dried herbs in a small basket. Kira was glad to have those and hoped she could remember which was to be used for what. Not that the herbs had been of any value to her mother when the terrible sickness came, but for the small things, an ache in the shoulder, a bite that festered and swelled, the herbs were helpful then, and she was happy to have the basket. She remembered her mother weaving it from river grass. Some chunky tubers, Kira smiled, picturing Matt grabbing food, probably nibbling while he was at it. She would not need those now. The meal brought to her on a tray in the evening had been hearty, thick bread and a soup made of meat and barley with greens throughout, and flavored strongly with herbs she savored but didn't recognize. She had eaten it from a glazed earthen bowl, using a spoon carved from bone, and then wiped her mouth and hands with a folded fine woven cloth. No meal had ever been so elegant for Kira, or so lonely. In the little arrangement of things were folded pieces of her mother's clothing, a thick shawl with a fringe at the edge, and a skirt stained from the dyes her mother used, so that the simple unadorned fabric seemed decorated with streaks of color. Sleepily thinking of her mother's stained skirt, Kira imagined how she could use her threads to outline the bright streaks of color so that with skill and time, it would take time, she could recreate it into a costume suitable for some celebration. Not that there had ever been anything for her to celebrate, but maybe this, her new quarters, her new job, the fact that her life had been spared. Kira tossed restlessly on the bed. She felt an object at her neck. It too had been in the bundle that Matt brought, and she treasured it most of the things he had saved. It was the pendant that her mother had always worn dangling from a leather thong, not visible under her clothing. Kira knew of it, had touched and stroked it often as a small tyke still breastfed. It was a shiny section of rock, split cleanly down one side, but studded with shiny purple on the other side, and with a hole to allow for the thong. A simple but unusual thing, it had been a gift from Kira's father, and Katrina had cherished it as a kind of talisman. Kira had lifted it from her mother's neck when she was ill in order to wash the fevered body, and had placed it on the shelf near the basket of herbs. Matt must have found it there. Wearing it now around her own neck, Kira lifted it against her cheek, hoping to recapture a feeling of her mother, perhaps the smell of her, herbs and dyes and dried blossoms. But the little rock was inert and odorless, without a hint of memory of life. In contrast, the scrap of cloth from Kira's pocket, the one which had created itself so magically in her fingers, fluttered where it lay near her head. Perhaps the night breeze through the open window had made him move. For a moment, Kira, watching the moonlight and thinking of her mother, didn't notice. Then she saw the cloth tremble slightly, as if it had life, in the pale light. She smiled, and the thought crossed her mind that it was like Matt's little dog, looking up, twitching its ears, wagging its woeful tail, hoping to be noticed. She reached out and touched the cloth. Feeling its warmth in her hand, Kira closed her eyes. A cloud shadowed the moon, and the room darkened. Finally, she slept, without dreams, and in the morning, when Kira woke, the little cloth was limp, no more than a wrinkled scrap of pretty fabric in her bed. 7. An egg. That was a treat. In addition to the boiled egg, her breakfast tray contained more of a thick bread and a bowl of warm cereal swimming in cream. Kira yawned and ate. Usually at waking, she and her mother had walked to the stream. Here, she supposed, the green-tiled room took its place, but Kira was nervous about the room. She had entered it the night before and turned the various gleaming handles. Some of the water was hot and startled her. It must be for cooking. Somewhere below, a fire had apparently been built. Somehow, the cooking water had been hoisted here. But what was she to do with it? There was no need for her to cook, Kira thought this morning, as she had last night. Warm, prepared food had been brought. Mystified still, Kira turned her attention this morning to the long, low tub. Jamieson had suggested that she could wash Matt there. There was something that looked and smelled like soap. Leaning forward over the tub's rim, she tried to wash, but the procedure was awkward and unnatural. It was easier in the stream, and she could wash her clothes in the stream and hang them on the bushes. Here in this small windowless room, there was no place to dry anything. No breeze, no sun. It was interesting, Kira decided, that they had found a way for water to enter the building, but impractical and unsanitary, and there was no place to bury waste. She wiped the cold water from her face and hands with the cloth she found in the tiled room and decided that she would return to the stream each day to attend to her needs properly. She dressed quickly, laced her sandals, pulled a wooden comb through her long hair, grabbed her stick and hurried through the empty corridor to leave her new home and go for a morning walk. But before she had gone very far, a door in the corridor opened. A boy she recognized emerged and spoke to her. "Kira the threader," he said. "They told me you had come." "You're the carver," she said. "Jamieson told me you were here." "Yes, I'm Thomas." He grinned at her. He seemed about her age, not long into 2 syllables, and was a good-looking boy with clear skin and bright eyes. His hair was thick and reddish-brown. A chip in one front teeth showed when he smiled. "This is where I live," he explained. He opened the door wider so that she could see inside. His room was just like hers, though on this, the opposite side of the corridor. His window view was to the wide central square. She noticed, too, that his room seemed more of a lived-in place. His things were strewn around. "This is my workroom, too," he gestured, and she could see a large table with its carving tools and scraps of wood. "And there's the storage room for supplies," he pointed. "Yes, mine's the same," Kira told him. "My supply room has lots of drawers. I haven't started work yet, but there's a table under the windows, and the light is good there. I think that's where I'll do the threading." "And there, that door? That's your cooking water and your tub?" Kira asked him. "Do you use it? It seems such a bother when the stream's so nearby." "The tenders will show you how it works," he explained. "Tenders? The one who brought your food? That's the tender. They'll help you however you want. And a guardian will be checking on you every day." Good. Thomas seemed to know how things worked. It would be a help, Kira thought, because it all seemed so new, so foreign. "Have you lived here a long time?" she asked politely. "Yes," he replied, "since I was quite young." "How did it happen that you came here?" The boy frowned, thinking back. I had just begun carving. I was a very little tyke, but somehow I had discovered that if I took a sharp tool and a piece of wood, I could make pictures. Everyone thought it was quite amazing, he laughed. I guess it was. Kira laughed a little too, but she was remembering herself very small, finding that her fingers had a kind of magic to them when she held the colored threads, seeing her mother's astonishment and the look on the face of the guardian. It must have been the same, she thought, for this boy. Somehow, the guardians heard about my work. They came to our cot and admired it. So similar, Kira thought. Then Thomas continued. Not long after, my parents were both killed during a storm, struck by lightning, both at once. Kira was shocked. She had heard of trees felled by lightning, but not people. The people didn't go out during thunderstorms. Were you there? How did you stay safe? No, I was alone at the cot. My parents were doing an errand of some sort. I remember that a messenger had been sent for them, but then some guardians came and got me and told me of their death. It was fortunate that they knew of me and felt that my work was of value, even though I was still small. Otherwise, I would have simply been given away, but instead they brought me here. I've been here ever since, he gestured around the room. For a long time I practiced and learned, and I've made ornaments for many of the guardians. Now, though, I do real work, important work. He pointed, and she could see that a long piece of wood was resting against the table, leaning in the same way that she leaned her walking stick. But this stick was intricately decorated, and from the shavings on the table, she could tell the boy had been working on it. They've given me wonderful tools, Thomas told her. Outside, the bell rang. Kira was disconcerted. Back in the cot, the sound of the bell meant that it was time to go to work. Should I go back to my quarters? She asked. I was going to walk to the stream. Thomas shrugged. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. There are no real rules, only that you are required to do the work you were brought here for. They'll check on your work every day. I'm going out now to visit my mother's sister. She has a new tyke, a girl. Look, I'm taking a toy. He reached into his pocket and showed Kira an intricately carved bird. It was hollow. He held it to his mouth and made it whistle. I made it yesterday, he explained. It took time from my regular work, but not much. It was easy to do. I'll be back for lunch, he added, because I have work to do this afternoon. Shall I bring my lunch tray to your quarters so that we can eat together? Kira agreed happily. And look, he said, here comes the tender who will pick up the morning trays. She's very nice. You ask her. No, wait, I'll ask her. While Kira watched curiously, Thomas approached the tender and spoke briefly to her. She nodded. You follow her back to your quarters, Kira, Thomas said. You don't need to go to the stream. She'll explain the bathroom to you. See you at lunch. He put the little carved bird into his pocket, closed the door to his room, and headed down to the corridor. Kira followed the tender back the way she had come. Jameson came to her room shortly after lunch. Thomas had eaten and hurried away to his quarters to resume work. Kira had just gone into the small room lined with drawers and slid open the one containing the singer's robe. She had not yet unfolded it. She had never been permitted to touch it before and was in awe now and a little nervous. She was staring down at the lavishly decorated fabric, remembering her mother's deft hand holding the bone needle, when she heard the knock on the door and then heard Jameson come in. Ah, he said, the robe. I was thinking that I must soon begin my duties, Kira told him, but I'm almost afraid to start. This is so new to me. He lifted the robe from the drawer and carried it to the table by the window. There in the light, the colors were even more magnificent, and Kira felt even more inadequate. Are you comfortable here? You slept well? They brought your food? It was good? So many questions. Kira considered whether to tell him how restlessly she had slept and decided against it. She glanced at the bed to see if the bed covering would reveal her tossing, and noticed for the first time that someone, probably the tender who brought and took away the food, had smoothed everything so that there was no sign that the bed had been used at all. Yes, she told Jamieson. Thank you. And I met Thomas the carver. He ate his lunch with me. It was nice to have someone to talk to. And the tender explained things I needed to know, she added. I thought the hot water was for cooking. I never used hot water just for washing before. He wasn't paying attention to her embarrassed explanation about the bathroom. He was looking carefully at the robe, sliding his hand across the fabric. Your mother made minor repairs each year, but now it must all be restored. This is your job. Kira nodded. I understand, she said, though she didn't, not really. This is the entire story of our world. We must keep it intact, more than intact. She saw that his hand had moved and was stroking the wide, unadorned section of fabric, the section of the cloth that fell across the singer's shoulders. The future will be told here, he said. Our world depends upon the telling. Your supplies? They are adequate? There is much to be done here. Supplies? Kira remembered that she brought a basket of her own threads. Looking now at the magnificent robe, she knew that her sparse collection, a few leftover colored threads that her mother had allowed her to use for her own, was not adequate at all, even if she had the skill, and she was not at all certain that she did. She could never restore the robe with what she had brought. Then she remembered the drawers that she had not yet opened. I haven't looked at, she confessed. She went to the shallow drawers that he had pointed out to her yesterday. They were filled with rolled white threads in many different widths and textures. There were needles of all sizes and cutting tools laid neatly in a row. Kira's heart sank. She had hoped that perhaps the threads would already be dyed. Glancing back at the robe on the table, at its wide array of hues, she felt overwhelmed. If only her mother's threads had been saved, but they were gone, all burned. She bit her lip and looked nervously at Jamieson. They are not colored, she murmured. You said your mother had been teaching you to dye, he reminded her. Kira nodded. She had implied that, but it had not been completely true. Her mother had planned to teach her. I still have much to learn, she confessed. I learn quickly, she added, hoping that it didn't sound vain. Jamieson looked at her with a slight frown. I will send you to Annabella, he told her. She is far in the woods, but the path is safe, and she can finish the teaching that your mother started. The ruin song is not until autumn start, he pointed out. That's still several months away. The singer won't need the robe until then. You will have plenty of time. Kira nodded uncertainly. Jamieson had been her defender. Now it seemed he was her adviser. Kira was grateful for his help. Still, she sent an edge, an urgency to his voice that had not been there before. When he left her room, after pointing out a cord on the wall that she could pull if she needed anything, Kira looked again at the robe displayed on the table. So many colors, so many shades of each color. Despite his reassuredness, autumn start was not that far away. Today, Kira decided she would examine the robe and plan. Tomorrow, first thing, she would find Annabella and plead for help. 8. Matt wanted to come. You be needing me and Branch for protectors, he said. Them woods is full of fierce creatures. Kira laughed. Protectors? You? Me and Branchy, us is tough, Matt said. He flexed what passed for muscles in his scrawny arms. I only look wee. Jamieson said it was safe as long as we stay on the path, Kira reminded the boy. Secretly, she thought it would be fun to have both of them, boy and dog, for company. But suppose you was to get lost, Matt said. Me and Brent can find our way out of anywheres. You be needing us for certain if you get lost. But I'll be gone all day. You'll get hungry. Triumphantly, Matt pulled a thick wad of bread from the voluminous pocket of his baggy shorts. "Filched this crusty from the baker," he announced with pride. So the boy won, to Kira's delight, and she had company for the journey into the forest. It was about an hour's walk. Jamieson was correct. There seemed to be no danger. Although thick trees shaded the path and they could hear rustling in the undergrowth and unfamiliar cries of strange forest birds, nothing seemed threatening. Now and then, Branch chased a small rodent or nosed about an opening in the earth, frightening whatever small animal made its home there. "Probably there be sneakies all in here," Matt told her with a mischievous smile. "I'm not afraid of snakes. Most girls be. Not me. There were always small snakes in my mother's garden. She said they were friends to the plants. They ate bugs." "Like Branchy, look, he catched in one now," Matt pointed. His dog had pounced upon an unlucky creature with long, thin legs. "That'd be called Daddy Long Legs." "Daddy Long Legs?" Kira laughed. She'd not heard the name before. "Do you have a father?" she asked the boy curiously. "Nah, did once. But now, me, Mom is all I got." "What happened to your father?" He shrugged. "Dunno." "In the fan," he added, "things is different. Many gods no pa. And them that got them, they be scared of them, 'cause they hit something horrid. Me Mom hits too," he added with a sigh. "I had a father. He was a fine hunter," Kira told him proudly. "Even Jamieson said so. But my father was taken by beasts," she explained. I heard that." She could see that Matt was trying to look sad for her benefit, but it was difficult for a boy whose temperament was so merry. Already he was pointing at a butterfly, gleeful at the bright spotted orange of its wings in the dim forest light. "See this? You brought it with my mother's things, remember?" She lifted the rock pendant from the neck of her shift. Matt nodded. "It'd be all purpley and shiny like." Kira dropped it back gently inside her clothing. "My father made it as a gift for my mother." Matt wrinkled his face, thinking that over. "Gift?" he asked. Kira was startled that he didn't understand. "When you care about someone and give them something special, something that they treasure, that's a gift." Matt laughed. "In the fan, they don't have that," he said. "In the fan, if they give you something special, it'd be a kick in your body. But that's a pretty thing you got," he added politely. "You be lucky I saved it." It was a long journey for Kira, dragging her twisted leg. Her stick caught at roots knotted under the earth of the path, and she stumbled from time to time. But she was accustomed to the awkwardness and the ache. They had always been with her. Matt had run ahead with Branch, and they returned to her, excited, announcing that the destination was just around the next curve. "A wee cot it is," he called. "And there's the crone outside in the garden, with her crookedy hands full of rainbow." Kira hurried along, rounded the curve, understood what he meant. In front of the tiny hut, a bent and white-haired old woman was working near a lush flower garden. She leaned toward a basket on the ground, lifted a handful of bright-colored yarns, yellow of various shades, from the palest lemon to a deep tawny gold, and hung them across a rope that was strung from one tree to another. Deeper shades of rust and red were already hanging there. The woman's hands were gnarled and stained. She lifted one in greeting. She had few teeth and her skin was folded into wrinkles, but her eyes were unclouded. She walked nearer to them, gripping a cane made of wood and seeming unsurprised by the sudden visitors. She peered intently at Kira's face. "You liken your mom," she said. "You know who I am?" Kira asked, puzzled. The old woman nodded. "My mother has died." I know that." "How? How did you know?" But Kira didn't ask. "I'm called Kira. This is my friend. His name is Matt." Matt stepped forward, suddenly a little shy. "I brought my own crusty," he said. "Me and my doggy, we be no trouble to you." "Sit." the woman named Annabella said to Kira, ignoring Matt and Branch, who was busily sniffing the garden, looking for the right place to lift his stubby leg. Doubtless you be weary and pained. She gestured toward a low flattened tree stump, and Kira sank down gratefully, rubbing her aching leg. She unlaced her sandals and emptied them of pebbles. You must learn the dice, the old woman said. You come for that, Your mom did, and she was to teach you. There wasn't time, Kira sighed. And now they want me to know it all, and do the work. The repairing of the singer's rope, you know about that? Annabella nodded. She returned to the drying rope and finished hanging the yellow strands. I can give you some threads, she said, to start the repair. But you must learn the dies. There are other things they'll want of you. Kira thought again of the untouched expanse across the back and shoulders of the robe. It was what they would want of her, to fill that space with future. You must come here each day. You must learn all the plants. Look, the woman gestured at the garden plot, thick with thriving plants, many in summer start bloom. Bedstraw, she said, pointing to a tall plant massed with golden blossoms. The roots give good red. Madder's better for reds, though. There's my madder over behind. She pointed again, and Kira saw a sprawling, weedy plant in a raised bed. 'Tis the wrong time to take the madder roots now. Fall starts better when it lies dormant. Bedstraw, madder, I must remember these. I must know these. Dies greenweed, the woman announced, poking with her cane at a shrub with small flowers. Use the shoots for a fine yellow. Don't move it, though. Lesson you must. Greenweed don't want to transplant. Greenweed for yellow. Kira followed the woman as she rounded a corner of the garden. Annabella stopped and poked at a clumped plant with stiff stems and small oval leaves. Here's a tough fellow, she said, almost affectionately. St. Johnson wort, he's called. No blooms yet. It's too early for him. But when he blooms, you can get a lovely brown from his blossoms. Stay in your hands, though. She held her own up and cackled with laughter. Then you'll be needing greens. Chamomile can give you that. Watery good. But take just the leaves for your green color. Save the blossoms for tea. Kira's head was already spinning with the effort to remember the names of the plants and the colors they would create, and only a small corner of the lavish garden had been described. Now, at the sound of the word water and also tea, she realized that she was thirsty. Please, do you have a well? Might I have a drink? She asked. And Branchy too? He'd been looking for a stream, but found not. Matt's voice piped beside Kira. She had almost forgotten that he was there. Annabella led them to her well behind the cot, and they drank gratefully. Matt poured water into the crevice of a curved rock for his dog, who lapped eagerly and waited for more. Finally, they sat together in the shade, Kira and the old woman, Annabella. Matt, gnawing his bread, wandered off with Branch at his heels. You must come each day, Annabella repeated. You must learn all the plants, all the colors, as your mom did when she was a girl. I will, I promise. She said you had the knowledge in your fingers, more than she did. Kira looked at her hand, folded in her lap. Something happens when I work with the threads. Then seem to know things on their own, and my fingers simply follow. Annabella nodded. That be the knowledge. I got it for the colors, but never for the threads. My hands was always too coarse. She held them up, stained and misshapen. But to use the knowledge of the threading, you must learn the making of the shades. When to satin with the iron pot, how to bloom the colors, how to bleed. To satin, to bloom, to bleed. What a strange set of words. And the mordants too. You must learn those. Sometimes some Mac. Tree gals are good, some lichens. Best is here. Come, let me show you. See you make a guess to its birthplace, this mordant. With surprisingly agility for a woman of 4-syllable age, Annabella rose and led Kira to a covered container near the place where a large kettle of dark water, too huge for cooking food, hung above the smoldering remains of an outdoor fire. Kira leaned forward to see, but when Annabella lifted the lid, she jerked her head back in unpleasant surprise. The smell of the liquid was terrible. Annabella laughed, a delighted cackle. Got you a gas? Kira shook her head. She couldn't imagine what was in the foul-smelling container or what its origin might be. Annabella replaced the lid, still laughing. You save it and age it good, she said. Then it brings the hue to life and sets it firm. It's old piss, she explained with a satisfied chuckle. Late in the day, Kira set out for home with Matt and Branch. The bag she carried over her shoulder was filled with colored threads and yarns that Annabella had given to her. These'll do for you now, the old dyer had said, but you must learn to make your own. Say back to me now, those you keep in mind. Kira closed her eyes, thought, and said them aloud. Matters for red, bedstraw for red too, just the roots. Tops of tansy for yellow, and greenwood for yellow too. And yarrow, yellow and gold. Dark hollyhocks, just the petals for mauve. Snotweed, Matt said loudly with a grin and wiped his own runny nose on his dirty sleeves. Hush, you, Kira said to him, laughing. Don't play foolish now. It's important I remember. Broom sedge, she added, still remembering. Goldy yellows and browns, and St. John's wort for browns too, but it'll stain my hands. And bronze fennel. Leaves and flowers, use them fresh, and you can eat it too. Chamomiles for tea and for green hues. That's all I remember now, Kira said apologetically. There had been so many others. Annabella nodded in approval. It's a starting, she said. Matt and I must go or it will become dark before we're back, Kira said, turning. Looking at the sky to assess the time, she suddenly remembered something. Can you make blue? She asked. But Annabella frowned. You need the woad, she said. Gather fresh leaves from first year's growth of woad and soft rainwater. That makes the blue. She shook her head. I have not. Others do, but they be far away. Who be others? Matt asked. The old woman didn't answer the boy. She pointed toward the far edge of her garden, where the woods began, and there seemed to be a narrow, overgrown path. Then she turned toward her hut. Kira heard her speak in a low voice. I ne'er could make it, she was saying, but some have blue yonder.